Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Abby Tolaria, coming to you live from Melissa Data's headquarters in Rancho Santa Margarita, California. Our webinar today is Deep Clean Your Salesforce CRM Data with Listware to Improve Sales. Joining me today is our resident data quality expert, Kevin Ube. He'll demonstrate the contact cleansing and enrichment capabilities of Listware by verifying and correcting Salesforce contacts and more. But before we jump right in, I want to encourage everyone to submit questions. You can type those in during any time during the presentation. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of the demo. Also, I want everyone to know that we'll be recording this webinar, so if you miss anything or you want to forward it to someone, you'll be able to do so. Okay, we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to pass it on to Kevin. Kevin?
Thank you for the introduction, Abby. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin, and I'm a data quality analyst here at Melissa Data. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Listware for Salesforce, and in this webinar, we're going to be focusing on how our plugin will help clean, verify, and enrich your Salesforce data. That's the main topic for today, so let's just jump right in. So what is Listware for Salesforce? Listware is a data quality app designed to verify and enrich contact and customer data within Salesforce. So on the screen, you'll see some benefits listed. First, this app can verify and correct addresses, phones, emails, and names. This in turn leads to better sales and marketing efforts as you don't have to waste time and money dealing with bad and unusable data. We also can append in missing contact data and other attributes, which in turn is another benefit as this improves your data by completing it and allowing you more ways to communicate better with customers and prospects. And then finally, Listware will allow you to look up demographic information for your customers, letting you know more about them. So this information includes data such as income, occupation, which you then can use to increase the effectiveness of your marketing efforts. So looking into this deeper, starting off with checking and validating, Listware will first do a check on your data by standardizing and validating given an address, phone, and email. So with addresses, Listware will determine if the address is indeed deliverable, and then make adjustments to the address if necessary, such as adding in missing zip +4s, suites, apartments, or missing cities. Now with phone numbers, what we do with those is check if the phone numbers are dialable, and then we can also identify them as business, residential, cell, or mobile. And then finally, on email addresses, Listware can correct common typographical errors. So like, for example, I have one up here. Someone typed in yahoo.com. They're missing the H. So we could correct errors like those. You'll see there, we'll correct that domain to yahoo.com. We also validate the email addresses up to the domain level, and that's done by examining the domain, checking if there's a mailing exchange record, an MX record on that domain. So in addition to checking and validating the address, phone, name, and email, Listware has additional data functionality for within the US and Canada. We can check if there really is indeed a match between a contact's name and address. So with our database of contacts, we can verify whether the name, phone, email, and deliverable address belong together. So being able to verify within a contact gives you a level of confidence on how good the contact is. Well, we can also take this a step further and then also append in missing data. So for example, let's say you have a contact with a name and address. You could run that record through Listware. It will search a database against that name and address. If it finds a match, then it will append in the phone and email. So that's contact append. We could also do various other appends, such as geocodes. That's basically where we return back the rooftop lat long, and we could do that for 95% of valid addresses in the US. We can also append in demographic information again. So those are the fields like the date of birth, household income, occupation, and etc. So batch processing. Some users may already have a large amount of existing records in their Salesforce org. So all the things that we talked about, we could take all your records, standardize them, and validate them. So for that, Listware provides multiple ways to batch process records. One way is you could start up a batch job that will process all records of a certain type. We also support batch processing through list views. So when you go and view some of your Salesforce records in a list, you can pick and choose which records to process through. And then Listware also out of the box supports contacts, leads, and accounts. So if you want to process other objects besides those, there are custom objects, such as custom objects. There are ways to do that, and I'll talk about that during the demo. So now it's demo time. I'm going to switch out of the PowerPoint. I'm going to head over to my browser. So in here, we're going to start the demo. I'm already logged into Salesforce. One thing I wanted to mention before I do get too far with the app, I want to mention that you can find our app on the App Exchange. So if you go to appexchange.salesforce.com and then look for our listing, you can do a search for Listware, and then you'll see our listing there. So here you can get the app. Okay, so going back to here. So once you got the app from App Exchange, you do an install, and now you got the app installed. So here I'm going to switch into my Listware app, and then you can see in this application there's a couple of tabs. There's one for administration, advanced mappings, and batch processing. We're going to be looking into those. So the first thing you want to do after you install the app is take a look at the administration, and then you see there's a couple of tabs. The one today we're going to focus on is the US portion, the personator component. So here you'll see there's a bunch of options, but just to go through this one by one. The first one is the actions. So during the beginning, I mentioned that we could do checks on your data, we could verify, we could do append, and then you could turn on those actions here. So you'll see that the check action, we always have to do that first. So basically, the check determines if your address is deliverable or not, if your phone is dialable, your email does exist up to domain level. We need to do a check first before we could do the other actions, such as the verify and append. So the verify action, that action will tell you which pieces of your input data correspond to each other. So in a general sense, a contact could have a name, phone, email, and address. If you want to know if such as the name and the address belong together, we could tell you through the verify action. And then we have the append action. So if you have missing data, if you're missing one of those elements, the name, phone, email, and address, we could append in the missing data. And then there's also the move action. Basically, if you give us a name and address, we could give you the latest address. So if that person has moved. Here you could turn on those actions or turn them off. Regarding the address checking, there's a couple options here. We have advanced address correction. So this takes advantage of the fact that you could pass in a name. And then when you pass in a name, we could do advanced corrections. So based on some person's last name, we may be able to determine the suite or the apartment. So if the address was missing one, we could take a look at the name and then append that information. We have the ability to append in the preferred USPS city name. And then down here, you can specify if you want your addresses in long address format. So if you don't want your suffixes abbreviated, you can turn that on, but you can turn it off as well, or you can have it auto. So if your address comes in as abbreviated, it'll remain abbreviated. If you give us a long address, it'll be long then. Then down here, we have the verify and append options. So basically, these options correspond with the verify and append actions if you have them turned on. With the verify, you could tell our app which piece of the contact will act as the primary pivot of your data. So there's a couple options here. You have the address, phone, and email. By default, it'll be auto, but you could select such as the address as your primary pivot. So if you want to verify and append information to an address, you could just select the address. You could just select the phone or the email. If you do auto, basically what that does is it'll take a look, see if your input data has an address first. If it doesn't, then it'll go to the phone. If it doesn't have that, then it'll go to the email. Then the append options here. So here you can control how Listware will append in new data. Here I have it selected check error. What that means is when personator does a check first, so remember that this app will always do a check first to see if the address is deliverable, if the email does exist, if the phone number is dialable. If there are problems with those elements, then what will happen is if Listware determines an error with them, it will append in new information. Or so that's check error. The other option, blank, basically if your input data is blank, then Listware will append in data if it has it. And then there's always, so this disregards if the data exists or not. It will always depend on whatever we have. And then there's a couple options here. So we could do name parsing, return back census information, phone parsing as well, email parsing. If you want to have demographics pop up, you need to turn on demographics here. So you want the household income, their occupation, those would fall into the demographics group. You could turn that on here. And then regarding with addresses, we could do geocoding. So again, we could do geocoding up to the rooftop level. If you want that, you just have to turn this, select the level here. We could do it to the street level as well if you just want it to the street, or you turn it off here. So those are the settings. Once you got that set in, next thing you got to do is you got to set in the mappings. So here you specify to Listware which fields in your object will be the input and then be the outputs. So by default, Listware supports contacts, leads, and accounts, the three main objects in Salesforce. If you do need support for custom objects, what you'll need to do is request an enterprise key from one of our sales reps. For that, then you need to talk with them, and they'll give you an enterprise key then, which you can place in here. And then once you have that, it'll give you support. It'll allow you to select the other types of objects. Just wanted to mention that in case anyone out there has a need for custom objects with custom fields, you'll need to get the enterprise key for that. But for example, just starting with the contact object. So I select the contact, and then what I could do here is each field I can map in has a drop down, and I just map in my fields from the contact object to Listware. So you can see in here I already have mapping for the name, address, and then in the outputs, also you're most likely going to put in the same fields again. So if we make any changes, those changes will propagate over to the outputs. Now there's a couple of fields down here. Salesforce natively doesn't have like fields to store like their occupation or income, but you could add custom fields to your contacts, accounts, leads. If you do that, we do provide a way for you to map those into your outputs. So if you want to store the date of birth into your contacts objects and you have a custom field in there, you can map those in as well. So you see there, you map in the demographics, you can map in census information and the result codes. So that's there. So I got that mapped in, I got my settings set in. Let's just go look and see what it looks like when we process a record through. So let's just go and create a new contact. So this one, let me see. So first thing goes there. I'm going to put in, basically what I'm going to do here is put in a name and address. I'm just going to save this. Now I'm just going to verify that we have a name and an address here. So just keep this in mind. It's just a name and address. I'm going to go back to the list view. So on that slide, when I was talking about the batch processing, we do provide ways for users to process records through the list view. So I'm in here in my contacts. I'm in the list view. So in the list view, you can pick and choose which records you want by selecting on the left. So the one record that I created, the Urimoto one, you see I have that selected. And then up here, you see that I have a personate button. We take a look at the address here. So this one's like lowercase. This one's missing the +4. Right here, I'm viewing a column for the personated results. There's nothing in there yet. I'm going to run this through. And then what's going on is that this app is basically it's contacting a web service to do an update. So this will take a few seconds. We just have to keep refreshing it. But you can see already there, it already updated it now. So the address is now standardized. I now get my result codes. I get the +4 in there. If I go back and view this record, you see there now I got the phone number, and that's because what Listware did is it appended in a phone number based on the name and address that I've entered in there. And then here I just have a custom field displaying the result codes. All these result codes have a meeting. meaning behind them. Um, but let me add in something to this page first, while that will explain this a bit more. So what you just saw there was me processing a record using list view. If I go back to list view again, we could obviously select multiple records of your choosing and then process them through. So that's through the list view. That's how you process records through the list view. Let me do something to the, let me change how we view the records a bit. So if you go to, I want to customize my contacts. So just to talk about how I got the search view button on there, if you go to the search layouts, and then if you go to the contacts list view, it'll be the same process for accounts and leads. They have a list view that you could modify. And basically how I got that list view on there is when you install our app, you can add and choose, you can pick and choose the buttons to add onto the list view. So you can see I already added in the personate button for contacts. You can do the same thing for accounts as well. We go to search layouts for the accounts, modify its list view. We could get the personate button there as well. And then we could do the same thing for the leads. If you go to its search layouts, customize its layout. And you just have to add a button as well. So going back to the contacts, what I want to do now is I want to modify the page layout. Or actually, I want to modify the buttons, links, and actions. What I want to do is override the view with one of our custom Visualforce pages. So you see here, I'm going to add in the personate page. Basically, that's the personate, again, is the US component of Listware. I'm going to add that in there. So if I go back and view a contact now, let's bring up the Urimoto one again. See, down here, the view has changed because now we have our Visualforce page running on that. So on this Visualforce page, it gives you a bit more details. If you don't want to read the result codes, this customized view page will tell you if the name, address, phone has been validated. And then down here, because our web service, the personal web service that we're using behind the scenes for Listware returns back so much information. What with this Visualforce page does is it displays it back for you. So it tells you when it was last processed. It gives you a breakdown of the basic stuff like the address, phone, name, and email. It gives you the parsing. It gives you census information, the latitude and longitude, and then you can look this up on Google Maps. And then down here is the demographics information. So down here, you can see that we return back like the gender, the household income, length of residence, what's their occupation, are they the owner or renter at that location, do they have children there. So these fields, again, are being displayed on the Visualforce page, but if you create custom fields for your contact object, you could go to the Advanced Mappings tabs and then map them into your contact object. So the result codes, you'll see them a lot when you use our app. Basically, whenever you process a record through our app, we return back result codes telling you if you made changes to your records, how good your data is, and so forth, or if it's just any errors. So you'll see some of these, like the ASs, those are related, the ones beginning with A's are related to addresses, the ones with P's related to phone numbers. The ones with DAs, that means data has been appended, and this one means, in this case, we appended in phone number. If you remember, I only typed in the name and address, got the phone number back. The GSs, those are for regarding the geocodes. And then we have the VR result codes. So these result codes would tell you, these are part of the verify action. These will tell you which pieces of your contact data matched. So if you click on this link below, it'll take you to the wiki page. And then down here, it'll give you a breakdown of all the result codes. So again, the ASs, those are regarding the addresses, the ones beginning with A's. Let's take a look at the VRs. So VR, if you look at our old record, we had a VR01 and a VR04. So in this case, the name, the individual's name and the address matched, and then the address and the phone matched. So that's the list view. So that's the list processing. We had the view page here. We do provide another way to go through batch processing. So if you don't want to do it through the list view, or you don't want to do it one by one through this page, on this tab, you have the batch process tab. So here you just specify which type of object you want to process through. Again, if you want to process other types of objects, you'll need to get the enterprise key from a sales rep and then paste it into under the advanced mappings tab. But basically here, we want to just pick your object, you pick which service you want. So Personator handles US. We do have a global component as well. That's not part of this webinar, but what we covered today for Personator, you just select that here. You can do record updating. So some people want to review the results first before the records get updated. You just turn that off. But if you just want it to go through, you just want Listware to update your records, fix those addresses, append in missing data, just turn this on. And then you have the batch settings. So you could process all records or process all invalidated records. So basically, unvalidated records are basically just records that have never been processed through. And then once you got those options set in, you just click on Start Job, and now get a batch job started up and running. So once you have a job running through, you want to know how many of your records were bad or good, how many records did we change, and so forth. We have a tab here, Listware Results and Summary. So earlier I had ran a batch job, but then here you can see that what we're seeing here is a list of records that have been processed through. So we have the Salesforce object ID, we have the name, address, phone, and email in there, and then we also have a column for the result codes. Each of these columns are searchable. So for example, if you want to find all the records that had a good address, you would look up records by the result code AS01. And then as I type that in, you can see that the view updated, and now it's bringing up all the records with AS01. If we want to find all records that had errors, those would be like the result codes with AEs, address errors. Find records where we appended in data, this would be DAs. So you could use this to find out, get a number of how many records were have been modified, changed, or validated, and so forth. And over here, the nice thing about this is you could go to the record directly. So on that left column, I just clicked on the ID, and I'll take you to the record directly. Yeah. So that's pretty much it for this demo. I'm going to go to questions now.
Thank you, Kevin. As Kevin said, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please type them in now. Again, I will reiterate that I'll be sending a link to today's recording, and you should expect to receive that via email tomorrow. Go ahead and type in your questions. Okay, we got a lot of good ones. What is the difference between Listware and Personator?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Listware is basically an app where it contains many components. So we have a component dedicated to US and Canada, basically North American territories. Then we have another component dedicated to global address verification. Listware, let me go to the administration tab. So there's a lot to Listware, but unfortunately we couldn't cover them in this webinar. But basically what we have in there, we're able to do address auto-completion. If we take, just as a quick example, some of you guys probably saw it when I was trying to type in that one URI record. I had some pop-up come up. So you can see there we have address auto-completion, and that's through the express entry component. That you could adjust here. We have a component here. So the main one we've been talking about is Personator. So that handles the check-in, verifying, move, and appends. And then we also have a global component. So the difference between Personator and this global component will do most of the checking, the same kind of checking that Personator does, but for 240 countries and territories. Now, what we can't do internationally is like append in missing data or do verification, such as does this name match with email or so forth. We don't have the data yet. But basically, if you want to know if some international address in some other country, is that address deliverable, or is that phone number dialable in that country? Is that email validatable down to the mailbox level? Those things we could do globally right now.
What is the pricing and how do users get charged?
So with this app, when you install it, you'll get 1,000 free credits. If we go back to the App Exchange, yeah, so you get some free credits. When you install this app, you'll basically get activated for a trial, and then you have some credits to use this app. When you purchase the app for $20, you'll get 10,000 additional credits. So this app uses a credit system. To explain this a bit more, if you go to we have a page that explains these credits. And basically, it'll give you a breakdown of how much it will cost to buy additional credits. And then down here is the credits pricing. So certain types of actions have certain types of costs. So back in the administration screen, you can see we turn on and on stuff. So some things like append cost differently compared to just doing a plain check. A contact check is just one record, one credit per record. If we do append for the address, it'll be 5 credits and so forth. You can see that demographics also has a cost associated with it. Geocoding, move updates, names and phones and pens. So there you see here the breakdown of how much each action costs. And then again, on the administration page, you could turn on and off those options. If you don't want to do verify, you don't want to do move and append. If you just want to do just checking, so again, that's just checking if the address is deliverable or not, if the phone number is dialable or not, if the email address exists or not. That's just checking would suffice that. But if you want to append in missing data, you want to verify your data, then you can turn those on. To control like demographics and geocoding, if you don't need the demographics, you can turn it off here. You can also turn off the geocoding as well.
How often can we expect your app to append in data?
So that's a good question. So typically, given like any given an arbitrary name or an address, we typically usually have an append rate of 20 to 30%.
We have time for one more question. How often is your data updated?
So when we do a check, our address data gets updated monthly. So we're using a CAS certified engine behind the scenes. We're CAS certified, so we get our data from the USPS. So that data gets updated monthly. Regarding the contacts data, so that's the data that matches, that puts together the name, phone, email, and address. That gets updated quarterly.
Well, it looks like that's all the time we have right now. Thank you again for attending today's webinar. If you submitted a question that did not get answered, we will contact you. Thank you again and have a great day. Bye.